我觉得我们可以停一下，因为我想啊，外面
没有人吗？
外面没有什么人
没有人，
对啊，
那怎么办？我都在炸了耶。
然后你已经开始唱，
先不要炸好了，因为
哦，我都炸下去啦。你看，而且这块太厚了吧？谁贴的？
先炸的先炸一下，然后我们后来就先不要炸好了。
先炸这个就好吗？
那我先去那个补习班，我确认一下。我去看看. 진짜 이럴 수 없어. 왜냐면 내 일을 해봤잖아. 이 시스템상 무조건 보내 선생님들은 오늘 보내야겠다 싶으면 보내는 거야. 예외 사항은 없어. 왜냐면 이미 애들한테 말을 해놨을 거고. 그러면 애들이 만약에 안 보내면 선생님 오늘 대만 음식 먹는다 했잖아요. 왜 안 가요? 이렇게 하면은 이제 선생님도 그냥 내 기분이 안 좋아서 널 보낼 수 없어 라고 할 수 없어. 그냥 애들이랑 약속했으면 무조건 지켜야 되는 거야. 그래서 올 수밖에 없단 말이야. 근데 이상하다. 까먹었나? 안녕하세요. 그 혹시 애들 혹시 몇 시에 이상하다. 그래서 이제 선생님도 그러면 선생님은 예외 사항은 없어. 무조건 이럴 수 없어. 왜냐면 내 일을 해봤잖아. 이 시스템상 무조건 보내 선생님들은 오늘 보내야겠다 싶으면 보내는 거야. 예외 사항은 없어. 왜냐면 이미 애들한테 말을 해놨을 거고. 그러면 애들이 만약에 안 보내면 선생님 오늘 대만 음식 먹는다 했잖아요. 왜 안 가요? 이렇게 하면은 이제 선생님도 그냥 내 기분이 안 좋아서 널 보낼 수 없어 라고 할 수 없어. 그냥 애들이랑 약속했으면 무조건 지켜야 되는 거야. 그래서 올 수밖에 없단 말이야. 근데 이상하다. 까먹었나? 안녕하세요. 그 혹시 애들 혹시 몇 시에 오는 건가요?
시간이 안 나와 있어서
어디에 시간이 안 나와요?
포스트에 시간이 안
포스터에 시간 안 나와 있었어요?
네네.
어쩐지 그러면 지금 애들 오시나요?
예, 지금 가면 되나요?
네네네.
네, 지금 가 있습니다.
세상이다. 포스터에 시간이 안 써 있었어. 포스터에 시간이 안 적혀 있었어. 포스터海报里面没有时间我没有放时间，所以他们不知道几点来。
所以他们
会等一下会来，你们时间 OK 吗？
我们可以，
你 OK 我就请他们来。
好。
哇，我真的忘记了，我都没有发现。OK， 那我叫他们来哦。
好。
OK。
我把都给忘了放萝卜，丑一。Judy 忘了写时间，丑一。那我们现在是1比1喽。
果然 Judy 没让我失望。Judy 真的很棒。
안녕. 여기 앉으면 돼, 여기. 여기 첫 번째, 두 번째 앉으면 돼. 안녕. 이야, 애들 왜 이렇게 많이 왔어? 뭐야?
真的来了。
뭐야? 여기 어디까지 나오는 거야? 잠깐만. 애들 진짜 많이 오는데? 애들 들어옵니다.
와.
잠깐만, 이거 너무 많은데? 잠깐만요. 몇 명이야, 몇 명? 안녕, 얘들아. 안녕하세요. 안 건가요? 뭐야? 잠깐만. 얘들아, 이제 앉아, 이렇게. 좋아. 이야, 앉아.
鸡排만 시간 들어가면 나가는 건 문제. 내가 치킨을 할까? 너가 이거 할래?
한 명 빠져야 되지.
지금 여기 있는 사람이 되게 중요해.
오케이.
튀기는 것만 하거나
네네.
여기서 우육면 나가야 되고 이것도 나가야 되고 다 해야 되거든.
오케이.
내가 여기 있을게. 내가 하는 게 낫겠다.
어디?
나 여기 있을게. 나 면도 담고
오케이.
해야 되니까.
제가 뛸게.
튀겨주세요.
뭐야? 오케이. 좋았어. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. 22명. 23명.
내가 왜 불러?
A 맞죠? A 합체 맞죠? 오케이. 23명. 얘들아. 한 사람당 한 개씩 주문할 수 있거든. 여기서 보고 나한테 알려주면 돼. 또 같이 친구랑 나눠 먹어도 돼.
우리 3개 시켰어. 나는 네가 왜
진짜?
그거 소고기랑 그거
맛있어?
진짜 맛있어.
숟가락 젓가락 우리가 줄 거야. 대박인 걸로 줄 거야. 한국 거 말고.
이번에 가져가도 돼요?
가져가는 건 오케이 줄게.
오,
오케이 필요해.
그래요? 저 제거
오케이 알았어.
저도
알았어. 숟가락이가 갖고 싶어?
알았어요. 저희 이용료는 괜찮아요.
잠깐만. 테이블을 해야겠다. 기다려. 1번, 2번, 3번, 4번, 5번, 6번, 1번 테이블을 유지하고 너네는 그러면 뭐 어떤 거?
이거 두 개하고 이거 하나요.
파이 하나, 어묵탕 하나, 그리고 우유면 두 개,
우유면 하나, 얘 두 개요.
아 티파이 두 개, 우유면 하나.
시판.
저기. OK， 哇，真的没想到人山人海，小朋友会一直进来，感觉到真的很多小朋友来了，差不多500名吧。
OK，原本想象的是应该是一桌一桌的过来，没有想到竟然是一次全部过来，压力瞬间变超大，然后变得超忙的。
사실 이게 학원 입장에서도 이게 수업이 일종이기 때문에 한 번에 오는 게 당연하거든. 한 번에 3,40명 온다고 난 생각을 했었는데 내가 까먹고 이제 이 둘한테 말을 안 했더라고. 뭐 어쨌든 많이 왔죠? 5육면 5육면이야. 5육면이 서로 소고기로 한 거야. 오케이 알았어. 알았어. 맛있게 해줄게. 기다리고 있어. 자, 주문 왔습니다. 애들 진짜 많아.
来真的啊！天哪！
566总共有几个？
우유면总共有1、2、3、4、11。
好，
우유면 11个。
11个。
OK。
OK，那우리先把那个面先给他们。
好。
我们有11个吗
对，11个。
？OK，小心哦，后面看，小心。
鸡排8个。
OK，그러면 내가 我把牛肉面弄完，然后给你，然后你把청경채
OK。
放在旁边，然后直接
就是中餐就可以。
中餐就可以了。
OK。
어묵탕有几个？
3个。
OK，好，그러면 그 뭐지 쟁반 쟁반 세팅 좀 해줘. 왜? OK，我给你看，我们先这样，这样，然后一点那个洋葱，这样，看一下，
一定要这样吗 ？OK。
对，OK，
OK， 这样子做。
看起来漂漂亮亮。那我那个把汤给你。
OK， 没问题。
예.
이게 원래는 이게 많이 주려고 했는데 학원 선생님이 너무 많이 주면 애들 다 못 먹는다 그래가지고 일단 이렇게 주고 부족한 애들은 더 주려고 일부러 이렇게 조금
对，汤
나왔습니다.
在后面你可以自己拿。
오케이, 상대 홈에 못 찌지나. 상대 홈에 못 찌지나. 오케이. 네.
没有人点鱼丸汤吗？
有啊有，3个人。
3个，
对呀、
外面有30个，只有点3个。
我也不知道，因为他们觉得有点陌生，怎么
想要你从这麻辣鲜。
怎么感觉我俩越来越多？不是，是点骂脏话吗？我俩
那不是重要，那不重要。
现在知道我的心情。
你们知道刚刚他们说什么吗？台湾的糖吃刚开的，他们想拿回家。
不行
不行。
我说可以
啊！
我说可以。
好，你的钱，你的钱。
他们觉得很神奇。
真的吗？
OK， 你们没好了，我去拿。
好，要上哦。
음식 나갑니다.牛肉面，等一下啊，不是等一下，sorry。 아, 아니 괜찮아. 이 켜져 있는 거야. 고마워. 자, 여기가 1번이지. 우유면 4개.
우육 4개.
오케이.
와, 맛있겠다.
자, 잠깐만. 숟가락 여기 있어. 잠깐만. 이거는 대만에서 갖고 온 거야. 그릇도 대만에서 갖고 온 거고 마라탕 그릇이랑 뭐 비슷해.
우육면 올려줄게요. 우육면. 우육면
这一次的厨房比较大，所以都很顺利的上菜喽。原本一次来这么多小朋友，还很担心他们会不会吃不到东西，要等很久。还好这一次呢，很顺利的立刻上了菜给他们。像之前在那个奶奶那边的时候，就一直有人在催嘛，然后就是突然他们也要加热他们的食物啊，所以就整个塞住了。那这次都没有，整个控制的很好。
먹겠습니다. 뭐 먹으세요?
사진 안 찍니 얘들아? 청경채.
그러면은 여기에 우유면 한 개.
야야야 이거 진짜 맛있다. 근데 이거 진짜 나는 우육면 고기 안 먹어.
거기 어디 잠깐만 이 뭐이지?
우육면
고기는 한 개.
나 혼자 빨아 먹었는데. 우육만 야르. 야르. 우육면 맛있어.
그 감명이 되게 강해가지고 괜찮아?
오케이. 굿. 엄청나 나오겠나?
我觉得我们鸡排现在够了，所以现在 focus 在那个鱼丸汤
我，也照完了，
加火一下，加热一下。
加热好，我也照完了，我也照完了。
OK，牛肉面全部上了，然后鸡排 OK，那最后一个是那个米碗汤。
OK，鸡排要放去哪里？
鸡排是，跟我一起去。진짜 신기했던 게 단 한 명도 취한 사람이 없었어. 진짜 대만처럼 만들어서 대만 향이 분명히 있었을 텐데 분명히 애들은 한 번도 먹어보지 않은 그런 향이 있었을 텐데 애들이 부어더라고요. 그래서 와우 이거는 대박이다. 진짜 이걸 오마이갓 진짜 생각도 못했어. 왜냐면 진짜 그 안에 대만 향이 있었거든.
因为我们拿来就是在地的口味的牛肉面，所以当然有一些小孩们应该不喜欢我们的牛肉面，因为太在地的味道。但是发现所有小孩都喜欢我们煮的牛肉面，所以我们也很高兴。
哈喽，大家好，这里是吉斯叔。来，梦工厂发布了非北专用净速机 Echo 80艾克80开箱，各种附件，还有小工具、头罩、扎带、备用桨叶，还有电池框框，还有好大的海绵垫，这是干嘛的？我的天哪，这说明书有点详细啊，学习一下。吉斯叔这边也要做详细的说明书，争取做到葵花宝典的级别。然后本体来了。 来，好好的看一下。飞北的标准呢，就是80毫米轴距，40毫米的桨叶。但是它这个好像练习用的， 所以给了45毫米桨叶。如果要参加比赛呢，是要换成40毫米的桨叶的。不知道看到视频的这时候，这个机子有没有进入到白名单啊？其实，在竞速飞行比赛用机这个领域，杰斯叔这边一直是个盲区，但其实是时候是要给大家去多做一些这方面的内容和产品了。因为你懂的，其实就是需求的问题嘛。我们家之前最热销的那个 ES 动力的 NBG75啊，其实很多学校和一些俱乐部啊都拿来用作训练。
Remain quite focused geographically.
Talk to me a little bit about France. There's quite a lot of political uncertainty still. There are, questions about taxes. How does it impact your investments in the country?
So, France is a big country for us. We are a historical operator. We operate the gas infrastructures, and we will always have this ask to our government that we would like to have stability, particularly on the fiscal front. But France is an important country, and that won't change anytime soon. I think budget needs to be passed, and we look forward to more stability, as we have also enjoying to some extent in Europe. Stability is sometimes a bit relative, and when we look at France and Europe, actually, we can find source of hope by looking at the stability, the fact that energy transition remains very important on the agenda, decarbonation, the need to invest in renewables, in infrastructure, that is still there in Europe, and we see that as a positive as an investor and developer.
But in terms of tax increases, does it actually change anything for how much capital you have to put into new projects?
For a company like us, the tax element that is being discussed in France, we can live with it. We don't like it, but we can live with it. It's not going to really change, our plans. But I think what's important is also for the rest of the economy, the stability is needed to make sure that companies and industry thrives. And of course, these are our customers. So it's very important also that there is this framework of stabilization that is offered for industry to thrive in France and in Europe. And that's good for us as well.
Catherine McGregor, how difficult or different was this Davos? There seems to be a feeling amongst some European CEOs that they were being pushed around by the US. I know the President of the United States then walked down some of the comments, but is the mood very different to previous years?
Yeah, the mood is bizarre. I would really summarize this Davos as the mood is bizarre. On the other hand, when it comes to the energy world, again, I go back to my first comment, energy is so top of mind. So when you're a utility, you feel that you're really doing something important for the different country where you operate. And that's really what I will retain from the situation here.
Catherine McGregor, thank you so much for
Thank you very much.
Engie, Chief Executive Officer. With that, Lizzie, I'm going to send it back to you in London. Thank you, and we'll be back throughout the day here from Davos. Day 3, what feels like many more days.
I feel for you, Francine. Hope you're keeping warm. That's Bloomberg's Francine Lacqua, of course. Now, I want to bring you the latest lines out of the Danish Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen, reacting to President Trump, saying that this framework of a future deal has been reached. She says she's had close contact with NATO since the Davos deal. She says it may be possible to negotiate on security and investment, but not on sovereignty. She'll seek dialogue, she says, with allies on Arctic security and the Golden Dome missile defense system. But the bottom line for her is allies must respect territorial integrity. And indeed, she says she has been assured that the deal does not impinge on sovereignty. So that's the latest from the Danish PM. Let's get to another top interview now from Davos. The US Trade Representative Jameson Greer says that he wants to open dialogue with Congress about their efforts to increase oversight of advanced AI chip exports to China. Speaking to us, Greer also discussed America's evolving export control policy. Let's have a listen.
The United States export control policy has always been fluid. That's how it is supposed to work. As technologies advance, older technologies become less sensitive and they can be shipped overseas. And so in the Trump administration, there's been an ongoing dialogue within the administration, with members of Congress, with industry, with consumers of chips, with producers of chips, to figure out what's the right balance for national security and commercial interests. And the president himself has made some of these decisions.
What do you make of Congressman Brian Mast's bill, which is basically saying that we need to regulate, Congress should be regulating these chips?
Well, Congress passed the law, the Export Control Reform Act back in 2018, that updated and gave new legal authorities for export controls. The Commerce Department has authority to implement those regulations. My view is if Congress has a view on this and they want to, take a stronger approach and take a more
because of the scale, this is an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. It's small. If I establish the 5 points on this thing, I'm restricted to a space about that big. And it's really hard to work with. So I gotta be able to optically estimate where those vanishing points are beyond this page. The one mark I will place, and the one mark that is the most important, is a small indicator horizon line. I'm not gonna draw the full line, but this marks where the horizon is. Now I know that the image going upwards, all this space up here, I will play with. I'm gonna use my Pigma liner. Let's go up this direction, and I'm not going to construct primitive forms. I am just gonna go straight in there. And I want this head to be some sort of like ogre-esque sort of thing, a giant floating head. And I imagine this almost like a boss character. And as an enemy, maybe at the end of a level. And he's gotta fight this thing. Have I seen this before? Things like it, similar to it. So as I have similar ideas, I then mix mash in my head right now. And so what am I thinking of directly? The very moment, a brow. A brow of some kind of head. So I'm pushing the shapes this direction. Going up that way, I'm gonna put a corner right here, and it's gonna go this direction. I'm gonna put slight little markers on here for you. This is what I'm seeing, going that direction. I want this to be a double head. Maybe I'll put an eye in the middle. And this will be another head facing this direction. 4 points going back this way. I'll have another element in the middle going back this direction for the 5th. Maybe the nose coming to the front, and I'm looking up, so I want there to be the underplane. Maybe it's got giant fangs and stuff hanging out on this direction. Cheekbone, that way, that way. Hits this corner, that way. Again, I'm going to do another sketch after this one that will primitively deconstruct everything for you. Do I see those primitives right now? No, these landmarks are slight evidences that I can visualize, but it's not a complete form. I'm going to now focus on what I want. Mindful of movement. I want this line. I want a line over there. I don't want it. This line over here instead I want.
Intuitively, without plotting everything on a grid, how does one get to that level? Well, it helps to understand the principles of perspective to use them intuitively. That's what my course is all about, and I do everything I can to make it easy for you. Check it out at Proko.com/perspective. Right now you can save 15% on all Proko original courses until January 1st. Get up to speed with Perspective Part 1 before we release Part 2 this coming year.
Let's put another one over here. Big giant statue heads that are alive. I'm going to put the Monkey King right there. As I turn it down this direction, let's put another point over here. Maybe some sort of central little figure. Marks, little marks now. These indicators will disappear. As I'm putting them down, they feel like construction or distractions or mess-ups. These I will integrate into the image and they will no longer be there eventually. Slow it down. As you draw, mindfulness, decision-making, breathe. All this stuff is overly complex. 5-point perspectives, 4-point perspectives, there's so much to think about. It's overwhelming. Simplify it, simplify. Be reminding of yourself of where things are. This direction, that direction, this way, this way, this way. Centrally. This is the horizon again, down here. Going down this way, curve, 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 curve. Mark, mark, Monkey King, fit right there. Staff over here. Sometimes I then internalize these thoughts. As I express them, I am in a way speaking to myself. And so I don't want to sound crazy. And I want to continue having fun. Let's put an extension of that head on this side. Before, the speed I wore as a badge of honor. Look how fast I can do it. No longer. Because even though it's a very useful tool that allows me to complete the deadlines I need to do, another element has become stronger as a force for me to focus on. And it's that, again, back to center, me, focusing on my approach, being mindful of my line, being mindful of my thoughts, and not letting the hand training take over. I'm making the choices. The hand follows what I want to do. Don't let your education and your formalities and systems overtake it. Don't lose yourself into it. You tunnel vision, all of a sudden time goes by. 40 minutes, 50 minutes, half an hour, or more, or less. And all of a sudden you realize, I don't even know where I am. What am I even doing anymore? Be present to every single second that you're putting a line down. Every moment, every line. This line could be my last line. When I say last line, the last line that I'll ever do. Then it becomes intensive. Super intensive. And for me, you don't feel it. My personal experience, as I can verbalize it, is that it's vibrating in front of me. The energy that comes from this is very, again, intensive. But the training, again, allows me still to filter, but I'm still being mindful. Don't let it take over. Very, conceptual, very philosophical on things. I've come to the point in my movement and my growths in my drawing abilities where these are the thoughts I've gone to. It's no longer into the trainings of how do I just improve quality. Quality doesn't matter to me anymore. How do I improve experience? Experience to live, experience to work, to draw, because this is an essence of me. This is everything that is me. I am exposing myself to you in terms of the drawing mentality, the approach that's very personal in terms of thought mechanics, the difficulties, the frustrations, the stresses, all being built up. And to share that, to expose that, difficult, very difficult. I want to put this on a pedestal, finish up this guy as well too. This is coming down, it's going to go up that way. Let's place some other structures over here, other kinds of beings, elements, going back this way, this way. I'm going to create this overlap first. I'll do the Monkey King here, and I'll finish up this sides. All this stuff is tertiary. It's just elements I can fill in later on. This right here, here's the focal point. Let's do the Monkey King. Head down to shoulder. As it goes up this direction, I'm going to push out the waist area. And because he's further away and smaller in scale, the forces of the perspective are not going to be as dramatic on him. The curvature and distortions are not going to affect this character. As the perspective warping is being established, the larger scale elements are being now affected by it. As we come down to the lower legs, here's the horizon line. Evens out the eye level, coming down, we'll see a perspective grid going this direction, where you'll see at least the feet being planted. Placing the staff. Move, mindfulness, slow it down. This central element here, maybe some sort of figurehead again. This is currently where I'm at, and I'm dealing with this as a battle every single day. Every drawing that I'm doing, this is the level of thought that's going into it. This is the back and forth tug of war that I'm facing at the moment. Trying to unlearn, trying to problem solve through all this training. Back up this direction, curve up this way, down this way. And this is going to be a structural form as well too, following those paths. This way, here. Let's put another element over here. And because this is so organic, that's why I'm not so burdened by the grid of the perspective. If it was hard, rigid lines, it feels a bit more, the incentive to be able to try to fit that is there. But because I'm making it more organic, it's the loose gestural idea of following these arcs. And even if it doesn't follow it to the exactness of it, it still emotes or at least captures the idea visually as to what I'm trying to project. Let's put one way up here. Going down this way. And massive things on these ogre-like structures. Now what I'm thinking in my head or seeing in my head, I saw that image flash in my mind from Prometheus. They go into that one kind of like room structure that has a giant massive head in there. I'm going to bring in that brush in just a moment. I'm imagining this structure as an essential figure that he's approaching to activate or something like that. Back over here with these parts, I'll start to suggest more rows and rows and rows, but they can have way less information. And horizon line we put about here. We'll readjust it. We'll bring it up a little bit higher. So as I'm now establishing one mark, and I'm seeing the curvature where I'm going up this way, I'm going to readjust it now back this direction. I'm going to reestablish a different area. As I made that mark from where I made the visual, I felt like the up angle was nice, but I was missing out the curvature down here. So even though I put the marker of the horizon line, I readjusted it, moved it up over here. This curvature, I can go up this direction and integrate those elements so it follows that path. Now it fits that line right there that I want. So everything is then negotiable. Everything is then adjustable in that moment. Nothing is locked as a tablet of scripture. You can always move things around. So even if you feel like, well, I put that line down over here and I'm not following it as much, I messed it up. I got to start over. Problem solve. Adapt. Integrate. Use those things. And from this piece, I'm learning so much how the visual looks, what elements do I want from it. If I sat here and I did this drawing again, I would guarantee you it'd be even that much more efficient and even stronger as a visual outcome. It doesn't mean I don't like this. I still like this drawing. I also just know that the one I would do afterwards would be even better. So that's why I don't stress on this particular piece, trying to match up to this grid of the 5 point, as this one's going back this way. Matching up over here, as all these elements are moving in their own directions. So as I establish all these parts, we're gonna bring in the brush pen now, we'll do some ink wash. I'm gonna suggest some parts. For me, in these moments, the time has slowed, and it feels like it's been longer to a degree, not shorter. Here, these pieces of detail, bring it out this direction. I want there to be a petals to piece on this part, some kind of feet. As that becomes a pathway, I'm gonna imagine a giant sort of like handle here he's gonna interact with, as I'll have intricate little carvings and details, indications within. And because this is a sketch, this is a exploration, the ability to be able to move and try to suggest information can be done. It's not about polish, it's not about finality, it's about discovery. From ideas to the visuals, to the perspective, to the story, to the world. Put one last one on this side. I might put one more element on there. These elements, again, are environmentally structural pieces, statue heads, beams, symbols of power, as we have a central figure here, and just visuals. Lines of path, going in this direction, maybe some sort of ceiling structural form up here, with pillars now coming down this way. And again, suggestive detail, as it goes this way over here, just indicated. Let's bring in that brush. And I'm going to just kind of water it down. What I'm using at the moment is just a bottle of ink. And from this bottle of ink, I just kind of dab a little bit of ink on there. I got a cup of water. Just water it down a little bit. This is a waterproof pen, so it will not bleed or run. I want this figure to be highlighted. I want him to come forward. The stuff in the back, I want to push back in value. So we'll start here in the center. I want there to be a stylized light coming from this corner down this direction. So again, I want to highlight the staff right there a little bit. All of this I'm going to group together. Back over here, we'll go down just a little bit more. Grouped together, all this stuff. I want the edge of his head to kind of pop out. And as it recedes away from us, it'll get lower and lower in terms of value. Now this is just a common paper. This is not something special. So its absorbent, it might crumple a little bit. You're starting to see these little spots, and that has to do with the way the paper itself is kind of absorbing the ink a little bit. So as I lift the pen away, it's pooling up a little bit more there. But I can go back on top, resolve those areas later on. Group together here. All this in the background. Let's go back into this portion. Turn some of the form. And move. All of this end groups it together, darker in value. Highlights on this side. All of it. Using the brush to be able to indicate a few details as I go, and this is the first pass on things. So now that I'm feeling it out, step back a little bit, just take a look. Once in a while, just kind of step away, observe, what do you got? Again, I want him to be highlighted a little bit. Same thing, just kind of use that value to surround the character. And the last step, we'll be going into a higher contrast. I'm gonna go directly into the ink and draw on top of it again. Now this is relatively fast drawing, so there's gonna be no smudging at the moment. And as we continue on, I may open it up to a question or two as we go to our final stretches of things. Let me just kind of get all this stuff down first. General idea of a light going this way. So I'm gonna go directly into the ink now. This should be relatively dry. And I may use a combination of tools here too. So what I wanna do is use the darker lines to be able to silhouette, define, separate as we go into this further. So at this point, questions are welcome.
Earlier you had said that you would work really fast, or you kind of like stop and kind of take a break.
Yeah.
When was it when you realized that you kind of wanted to start doing that?
So when I decided to be able to alter the approach and mentality of how I'm drawing from the initial overtly speedy approach of not having the mentality was this year. And what initiated that change was feedback, interactions with other people, and especially people I respected, and asking them directly, hey, what do you perceive when I draw? What do you see? And they would tell me these things. We love your work, but you're also doing this and this and this and this. And I read that as not as a criticism, but as a feedback of that's good information I need to be more aware of. At the certain point where I'm at now, it's hard to get feedback because I'm the one giving feedback to people. So I'm not always around peers that I'm working professionally with. I only might see them at a show. So as I talk to them in those, those opportune moments, I'm always hungry for information. And I ask them, hey, what can I maybe improve upon? What do you see here or there? What do you think about my process? And they'll mention things, and I want to hear it. And so, especially with people that I highly respect, I'm going to listen intentfully. And I had this conversation in July with someone that was a manager from Superani. And I respect his words, and I took down notes. He wished he saw this and this a bit more from me, and I took it to heart.
And since you started doing that, have you seen improvements in your work?
Yes, and it was an immediate effect because what happened was it was so ingrained in my mentality, I could not stop thinking about it. It became then an obsession of mentality of thought. Even though I wasn't actively pursuing it, because I'm mulling it over in my mind and processing that information, what does it mean to me? How does it feel? Then I can actually sit down and actually, as I draw, immediately act on it. So it only took me a couple of months to be able to see direct results of action. And it happened with a trip that I went to in Korea, a lot of things that I've seen, gathering new materials, this brush that I got as well too, it forced me to be a lot more sensitive.
Okay, great. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. I'm gonna wrap up this area right here to here, and that will be more the clarify spot. What I love about this brush is that it holds so much water. It's a thin brush, super long, but it holds a lot of ink. And I can go, and I don't have to actually dip back into it. The only reason I did beforehand was to water it down. I guess in this situation also to talk about further on the application or the implementation of this for myself personally, do I really use 4.5 point a lot? It's not every single time. Because the thing about these sort of images is that they're so extreme and so strong is that if every image you create is to this level, it loses that intensity. So I'm going to only really incorporate that in opportune moments of time, not every time. I want to maybe more capture more the general visuals, how we see as humans, optically into the world around us, which may stick to primarily just 2.3 point. And maybe that range of, maybe I will go into 4 point, but it won't be so extreme. It'll be more subtle, just slight. The subtlety of that, the range, the gauge of how much you're playing with that can be more soft or more extreme. Let's push that background down a little bit, highlighting his face to the edge of silhouette, using the natural brush to create texture, strokes, and lines, and making sure I can use the dark contrast to also pop that out. So the initial line was, in a way, almost like a lay-in, a constructive information, even though it was permanent and it required a lot of attention. But I can still use the brush now to be able to help remedy certain things that maybe I want to be able to refine or to even disguise, to integrate into things that I want to make it work. I'll clean up edges. I'll make the legibility, the clarity stronger. All this stuff gets knocked down. High contrast right here. I want the eye to go right there. So from this contrast, as it goes away, above and back and down, that I'm going to leave alone. I don't need to touch it anymore. I'm going to focus more on this. I'm also limited on time. I can't do everything at once. I got to prioritize. I have to make decisions. I want this right here. That's it. I have all this to maybe work on. Oh, but what about the detail there? And what about the quality of that? I'm done with that. I'm choosing to stick to this. And then again, we slow down. This brush demands it. It's so soft. It's so nuanced. You need to have a very light touch. And if I'm not mindful of that pressure, of my speed, of my line, it could be a mess. And this sort of training, what do I do to be able to use a brush like this? I mean, do I just stick with pens like these? This sort of pen is nice because it is a felt tip brush pen. It does have a sponginess to it. And you would use these tools to be able to exercise, build the muscle memory, but also use them to destroy, right? You can wear these tools out. You don't want to wear something like this out. This is something that's a bit more elegant. It requires the care. You got to actually respect it as well too. This one, I want to beat the crap out of and learn from this, right? Now we go to the one that we have to push in terms of being mindful. Test the limits of your materials. Break them if you have to in the ones that you know you can replace.
How do you typically balance naturalistic and designed elements in your artwork?
So the naturalistic would be what? From the observations of the real world.
Like in this piece right now, without the light source in the middle, like all the stuff at the end would be really dark, but you're choosing to keep it light. So that's part of like the design part. So how do you weigh whether you want to do it naturalistically or designed?
So of course it can't be so equal, and making it equal, in my opinion, falls flat. I think it's more about being able to again define one as being the primary and one being the secondary. So you can say I want to go more naturalistic as a primary and respond to it in the real world how it works, or I'm going to go more design oriented as a priority, and the natural elements are there for support. So you got to make a decision as to what sits on top and below. This is more design, less naturalistic, not reality. I can change the lighting or the atmosphere, the effects of the contrast, the way I want to, because I'm trying to tell a story to you. So I'm going to design and make those choices myself, and it break the rounds of reality if I have to. And we're getting to the point where I'm now starting to define where I want to go with this. I'm going to move my lines around with the brush, let it take its own action, of course. So now a question within this is like, well, when do I know what I'm starting to finish and I'm done? Once I've achieved the elements of all the pieces that I had within the scene, and there's nothing else I want to add, and I'm not only working on the pieces that I have within, and I start noodling away, small little bits of details, I'm probably going to consider myself being close to done. So right now I'm still kind of in the mode of doing these really big movements, large strokes, covering ground. So I'm still kind of in that mode of like, I can still work, and still add more. I'm going to continue to isolate where I want to go more. Finish this part right here. I'm going to make the naturalness of the brush to move the way I want. The brush wants to be gestural, calligraphic, thick and thin. Let's push the silhouetting on this part. If there's any last question, we can take it, but it'll be the last one.
Is the cup 50% water and 50% ink?
So right now, this is honestly, I have no idea, a randomness. It was clear water at some point, and now it's a murky water or something. So I'm actually using the ink as 100%, knowing that, and using this to kind of wash it down to get to the level of value I want. So this is not a set value, but I know that this is. So I work from that initially, the ink.
Have you ever had multiple cups with some more water, some less water?
So typically in my own illustrations, it would be, yeah, I would do that. I might have like 2 or 3 different sort of cups. One that's a little bit more water, based. I can just do the, first I'll make it really, really kind of muddy, and it's all just like washing it down. And if I want that to be a little bit lighter than this, then I might go to another cup that has water as well too, and then wash that down and get even lighter than that. So there could be about 2 or 3 cups for me, but even a single one is enough.
Where did you get your brush pen? Your
this
pen
brush
you're working with now?
So this brush I got in Korea, and it was a gift from Hyunjin, the manager in Superani. So when I visited Korea in July of this year, it was my second time going in my life, and the first time I went was over 30 years ago. So it was nice to be able to visit the team, go visit the Kim Jong-il Museum, see them together, draw at an event. I was there for a festival, travel, obviously the country, enjoy the food, because the food was amazing.
What kind of ink is that?
This is Platinum brand carbon-based ink. But so far, fun sketch. A little bit hit on that guy right there, a little bit of rubble, quick pat.
哦，这有鱼啊！
这边是标准的毛锐物猎蚁，这边是我们的 Maker Pro AR 那其实你看哦，今天你看到这一颗，它其实是一颗非常精密加工的东西，它是 CNC 的。可是如果有来 MOA 展的，大家都会知道这个是海卡法原点，大家都在做海卡法，所以每一家这边做枪的尺寸都不一样。所以你看，尽管我这次做的非常的顺，可是你看，还是有比啊，对啊，掉了没了。那你想象，如果我今天我在开枪的时候，我在
The countdown is on. Everything you need to get the edge at the end of the market day. Get ahead of tomorrow's trading with the close. Weekdays on Bloomberg. Context changes everything. Welcome to the world of decentralized finance.
Why is it that NFTs have not recovered in the same way that, say, Bitcoin has?
Bloomberg is covering all things crypto.
It's a pretty spectacular story.
The people.
This is the future. This is the 21st century economy.
The transactions.
It snapped up nearly $1 billion of Bitcoin.
And the technology.
We need to build a digital Fort Knox.
That gives people financial freedom, and that's a wonderful thing.
That's extraordinary.
We ride the wave that is Bitcoin.
Bloomberg Crypto. Tuesdays only on Bloomberg. This week, live from the Alpine Mountains of Switzerland, is the World Economic Forum annual meeting in Davos. Bloomberg Television brings you unmatched coverage and conversations with world leaders, business executives, and billionaires as they navigate responsible AI deployment, economic expansion, and geopolitical tensions. Tune in for daily coverage all week. Context changes everything.
We have not seen any reason to do that now, and we have followed this very long-term approach that let's reflect the global equity markets, the global markets, to mirror the size of the different markets more or less, and that has served the fund well since the beginning in '96. The first time I was Minister of Finance, and also now when I'm back in the same job.
Norway's Finance Minister Jens Stoltenberg saying he sees no reason for the country's sovereign wealth fund to exit US markets. And this, earlier this week, given the geopolitical tensions, has been a topic of conversation. And Jens Stoltenberg, a really interesting person to hear from with that in mind, because yes, he's a finance minister right now, and he's giving there the view of a finance minister, I think. But clearly he used to be at NATO, he used to run NATO, he used to be the Secretary General over at NATO. So he also has that perspective and that very Northern European perspective on the geopolitics and what's going on right now.
I don't know what. So we've got this meeting coming up a little bit later on of European leaders. Does the Davos deal mean that meeting is no longer required? Does Europe no longer need to respond?
Well, because there's so much we don't know about what that includes. For example, sovereignty of Greenland. Because President Trump says we get everything we wanted. He was asked whether that includes sovereignty, ownership of Greenland, and he made a big deal about that being important. And he said it's complicated. And then we heard from the Danes this morning saying that that was not part of the framework. There was no Rutte said there's no conversation about sovereignty.
Going back to what you both touched on before the break, which is the fraying of US-EU relations and the fact that some damage will be lasting, and what that does for our appetite for European versus US assets, and if it does catalyse structural reforms in Europe around things like banking and around things like defence, and longer term, that could be a benefit for European assets.
Okay. Let's get back to Davos. US President Donald Trump says a framework of a future deal has been reached, but the transatlantic dispute has brought Europe's reliance on US security guarantees into focus. Let's get back to Davos. Bloomberg's Francine Lacroix is there, of course. Francine.
Anna, thank you so much. Yes, I'm delighted to be here in Davos, and I am joined by Nadia Calvino, the president of the European Investment Bank. Ms. Calvino, thank you for joining us. It's been a bit of a different Davos. I think there was a lot of anxiousness from a lot of European leaders and a lot of European businesses about what happens when Donald Trump spoke yesterday. Does it change anything in terms of the EIB, for example, how much you spend on defense to match that 5% for example, what countries give to NATO?
Well, we've already started our change, a couple of years ago, and 2025 has already been a sea change, if I may call it that way or describe it that way, because we already reached 5% of our activities inside the EU, devoted to security and defense. We are already financing a number of flagship projects, large-scale projects, including a military campus in Lithuania, research programs. So I think that we are on track to provide a very strong contribution to Europe's security and defense capabilities.
What happens next in terms of how Europe can organize itself, and does it change slightly your focus for the EIB?
Well, I think that what's going on is really a change of the world order. I think Mark Carney was very right on spot when he described what we are living. And that makes events like Davos more important than ever, because we need to have fora to debate, to talk to each other, to try to find compromises. Because at the end of the day, the approach of the European Union must be pragmatic when we can, but firm when we must. And I think that we are at one of those turning points in the current week.
You were part of the Spanish government, of course, before joining the EIB. Do you think that leaders and Spain should join France in trying to maybe activate the anti-coercion instrument against Donald Trump?
I think this is not a trade issue. It's not about tariffs. I think that also in the last 12 months, we've become used to tariffs coming in, going out, 24 hours is not enough to keep track. So I think that what we need is to see how to engage, how to reorient the strategic relationship that we have with the United States, which is obviously our most important partner from many points of view. And so it goes beyond, I think, the discussion on one or another trade instrument.
What's the role that the EIB can do in European defense if NATO acts no longer as a shared security framework?
It's quite clear that in any case, we need to reinforce Europe's capabilities. And that means investment in research, investment in industrial production, also becoming state-of-the-art, in terms of cybersecurity and new technologies. That is exactly what the European Investment Bank is doing. We have signed very important deals already with, just to give you an example, Quantum, the very important drone manufacturer in Germany. We have signed research programs with Thales, with Indra, with OSIA. So we are already on the spot financing those projects that can make a difference for Europe. And I think that we will start seeing the difference quite soon.
President, could the EIB actually be crucial for countries with high deficits or debts not willing to sacrifice their welfare states, such as Spain?
Well, Spain is not really an example right now in terms of the situation of the fiscal situation, because actually Spain has exited the excessive deficit procedure, so it is not one of the countries that is flagged, as a concern from that point of view. But indeed, I think that member states do see more and more the European Investment Bank as their partner to be able to continue to finance strategic infrastructures for the country. We're talking a lot about security and defense, Francine, but citizens care about housing, about health. Just today we're going to sign a very important deal in the housing sector, the largest ever in Belgium, 1.7 billion euros. We are really supporting those investments that are critical, not only from the business or the strategic point of view, but from the citizens' point of view. And I think that's important.
So do you think there's just a bigger role for the EIB, actually? How much of a bigger role does it have in 4 or 5 years from now?
We are already having a bigger role. In 2025, we hit the 100 billion unprecedented level. And with our AAA and the fact that we have the 27 member states as our shareholders, that we have a very clear strategic roadmap which is fully aligned to European priorities, I think that we're in a very strong position to be an engine and a key actor, and that's already happening as we speak.
Do you think this week in Davos there was a wake-up call from policymakers in Europe to be more competitive, to try and act and be more sovereign, but also from businesses and chief executives that maybe they could do things differently?
What we are seeing in the last year, and I think that we have seen it in the many meetings and events I've participated in Davos, is that there is strong interest in investing in Europe, that Europe is perceived to be a beacon of stability and trust, and that is essential for investors, obviously, and that Europe is also moving from action plans to action. And that's exactly what we need to do. I mean, we know each other for many years. I'm really a person that is focusing on what we can do, and I think that's already happening.
I mean, Spain just announced plans for a sovereign wealth fund, right, to fill the gap left by the expiration of the next-gen EU. Is it something that the EIB could pick up?
We're already partnering with Spain and with other member states to try to make the maximum out of the Recovery and Resilience Facility. Spain is an example in terms of good use of those European funds. I mean, the growth level of the country, the reforms that we were able to undertake to really modernize and improve productivity in the country and digitalize it are already showing their impact. And I think it's very wise to try to extend that possibility so that we can continue to keep in Europe, and it's not only Spain, I insist, the right level of investment. We should avoid, and I think that's the trade-off that you're trying to ask me about, we should avoid that because we invest more in security and defense in stricter sense and military investment, that we do not take care of all those investments that are also strategic for the future of Europe, because our security does not only depend on tanks, it is also about energy, it's about productivity, technological leadership, and international partnerships.
Nicolina, I mean, there's also going to be a change at the top of the ECB as, they're looking for a replacement for Madame Lagarde when she steps down. Is it time for a Spanish person to be in charge?
Well, thanks for raising the issue. Indeed, there's never been a Spanish head of the European Central Bank. In my current position, I couldn't possibly comment, but the fact is that Spain is the fastest growing economy. It's a large country, a large economy, very performant. They're excellent professionals, I'm sure, and it has never had a person at the helm of the European Central Bank. But it's not for me to comment.
Nicolina, thank you so much for joining us. That was, of course, the president of the European Investment Bank. With that, Tom, I'm going to send it back to you in London, and we'll have plenty more throughout the day here in Davos.
Okay, Francine Lacroix, thank you very much indeed. Fantastic stuff. Yes, some excellent additional interviews coming up as well throughout our programming. We're going to be hearing from the former UK Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. That is coming up next, guys.
I love it. Not for me to comment. But a Spanish person would be quite a good idea. I just got to point out there's going to be a German.
No,
boss
and
of the
actually,
ECB.
we've done a survey, as we do, of economists, and the Dutchman Klaas Knot is most likely to succeed Christine Lagarde at the helm of the ECB, according to a Bloomberg survey of economists. Now, we have had a Dutchman.
Yes.
It was really interesting, pivoting a little bit, to hear from Nagel yesterday, obviously typically on the hawkish end, suggesting that, we would have to put a rate cut back on the agenda if tariffs come through. We know that's not the threat right now, but it was interesting to hear one of the
tomorrow.
There's always the next few hours.
Yeah, who knows? We might get some more tariff news. Who knows? As Tom was saying, Rishi Sunak will be with us, former UK Prime Minister. That conversation coming up from Davos. That's next. How does he reflect on this week's events? This is Bloomberg.
This has no GPS, so it's quite a bit ways away. Let's land, and then I want to do.
Hello everyone, today we're taking a look at the HD0 Crux 35, or should I say Crux 35 HD0 version. Now right down in there you see that camera there? That is our micro or nano camera from HD0, collaboration with RunCam, and then we have our Whoop board right in there. Hopefully you can see that. So obviously I have both. This is the analog edition, which I really like, and you might have seen, those of you that really are active on the Facebook FPV groups, John C. had posted about how much he was enjoying his analog version. I kind of chimed in that, it's one of my favorite 3.5-inch quads, and that I had planned to put HD0 inside mine this winter. Well, Happy Model beat me to the punch. They've already made it. So there are some minor differences outside of the HD0. We'll go over those real quick, but keep in mind that if you're looking at this and what you see, that you'll need to either have the Fat Shark Scout HD goggles, or you'll need to have the VRX, previously known as Sharkbite. I think it might just be known as HD0 now. And then you need to have goggles with that can take HDMI inputs. So you can't fly this with your typical goggles, and if you have DJI, well, you're probably picking up the DJI version of this then, right? So let's weigh it up and let's get started with an actual flight. Before we weigh them up, let's take a look at a couple of changes that I implemented. They're pretty minor things, but obviously I have a battery mat, a rubberized battery mat on mine that's sticky, and a smaller battery strap because I like to use smaller batteries and I don't like my battery tail hanging around. Also, on this one, I did something that I should do on the other one, which is to zip tie the battery lead down. You can see we've got a little bit of flex in here, and then it's down around this post. This will secure the battery lead. I do this all the time. Also, back over on my original, I took a little piece of zip tie and I routed it behind the mount. You can see here, and then I added some heat shrink because I didn't like how the Express LRS antenna was kind of just wiggly. I always kind of feared that it would get in the prop. It has that potential, if you can see that there, that you could get a prop strike. Pretty extreme circumstances, but, you know, I did that. The new one has the foam mat here on the bottom. I think previously mine didn't even come with this mat. That first batch production run didn't even have this mat, so now they have a foam mat. I'm not a fan of those. I always prefer a rubberized mat, which does mean slightly more weight, but it also gives us a lot more grip on our battery. My original, with the changes that I implemented, comes in just under 92 grams. Nearly factory default HD0 Crux 35 comes in at just about 94 grams. In the flight, you're going to see I am testing this new G&B 650 milliamp 4S battery, and it is high volt charge, so you'll notice in the flight, bottom left-hand corner, it is going to show 4.3 volts per cell, so it is high volt charged, and recently G&B said these batteries can take high voltage charge, so I'm testing that out, but I don't encourage you to do the same because these were sent to me, so if I kill them, nothing lost, but if you kill them, you're out of good battery. And with that battery, it weighs 168.5 grams. Okay, so the first thing to notice is that I said it's high volt charge, so we have 4.31 volts per cell down there in the bottom left. Also, the screen aspect ratio, just to be clear, because I know the internet's a big place and some people try to say I'm trying to make HD0 look better than it is. The flight footage from the DVR is actually at 125% scale, so that's larger than the default scale for the video. So actually, if it looks worse, that would be what I'm doing, because I'm blowing it up, making it bigger than it actually is. Something to consider there, especially if you're watching other videos out there. Those might be full screen videos. Those full screen videos could have a scale percentage that's even larger than mine. So something to consider there. And oddly enough, I got a number of requests on this review to make sure I actually fly it, which I thought was kind of curious. I kind of felt as though those comments were suggesting that I didn't fly it last time, but I kind of always fly these things though. But anyway, so we take it a rip around the house and the backyard here, and I like this version. I like the 3.5-inch prop that's really light. I would say this is a large toothpick, or I used the term on the thumbnail of my original video, which I will link down in the video description if you want to go see all the text and specs and discussion about the frame and components. I called it a big pick because it's not like any of the other 3.5-inch prop quads that we've seen come out. Most of them are significantly heavier. They're made more to handle GoPros or even naked GoPros or some sort of external HD camera. This one can do those things for certain, but it's just significantly lighter than the other 3.5-inch version. So even with a GoPro, it's going to have more agility because it has lower weight, and it's probably going to have longer flight time because it has lower weight as well. So that's something that you need to kind of, when you're looking at all these different ones, take note of the fact that this one is significantly less. And also, if you've already noticed, on the lower kind of mid to left half section of the screen where the milliamp is showing in the OSD element, it's not a smudge. I actually damaged the lens. The flight before this one, or the day before this day of flying, I crashed it into a tree, but the tree crash didn't actually harm the lens. But what happened when I came into land is that I came up to the cement portion of the back patio and I disarmed and it rocked forward, and I think it hit the edge of the cement because the lens, and you may have noticed it in the intro there, the lens has got a fairly significant scratch on it now, so that's kind of unfortunate and kind of blemishes our FPV view here as we watch it zoom around. There's also a price difference on this. Of course, the analog is going to be the cheapest version out there, and it comes in around $142. They also have an HD version with the Air Unit Lite from Caddx, which is $269. And this version with the HD0 Whoop, which is a maximum of 200 milliwatts, and the nano camera comes in at $235. So about $35 less than the DJI version, but it's significantly more than the analog version. Almost $90, or right around $90. I got a little sloppy there as I kind of got out of control. That happens from time to time, especially when I fly this long. I have found over the years that once I get over 2.5 minutes, I almost have to give myself a break. That's when I usually go for a longer pass in the backyard. Maybe that back fence line pass to kind of relax myself, maybe give myself a moment to readjust my fingers on the sticks, which I do oftentimes need to do. So, sometimes if I fly for a long time, and this thing flies for a long time, on that 650 milliamp battery that is high volt charged, I have to make adjustments, and I need a little bit of relaxation in there so I can take a breath before I get back to the fun intensity of zooming around the yard and all these trees, which, if some of you have been around long enough, we used to have a lot more trees. We actually cut some trees down, and many of you have noted the flags in the yard. Yes, we're going to have some construction eventually in the backyard. It was supposed to have already started, but, supply chain issues. We are going to be putting in a pool. Our girls love to swim, and my wife likes to hang by the pool. So after years of resisting, I've relented and agreed that, okay, let's get a pool. It's better than moving, because my wife kept wanting to move to a house that already had a pool, and boy, do I not want to move. I like our house. I like our backyard, and even with the pool, we'll find a way to have some FPV fun here in the backyard. You can see we get some warnings there on screen. It doesn't say low voltage warning like it does in the OSD Element 4 analog, but we're going to come into land and we're going to end up in good shape with a flight time of nearly 5 minutes, 4 minutes and 44 seconds, and our battery voltage at 3.66 volts per cell. And of course, that is high volt charged battery. So we could have flown 5 minutes on this battery, no problem. So to save you some time of having to watch the full talkie-talkie video about the original version, my main concern with this is the largest quad Happy model has made. And I was always concerned about the thinness of the arms. You can probably see that here. But I'd like to get some input from those of you that have either the Vista version or the Air Unit Lite version or the analog version, which this is the HD0 version. How is your frame held up? That's kind of the curiosity in my particular case, because that frame has been my main primary concern. I guess the board down here on the bottom, it is new, so that should be a concern. But I've got 2 of them now. I've put them through their paces. I've flown this one somewhat frequently since the review came out, so it's had a number of bad years through it, and I've had crashes. I still crash quite often. So I think it's okay, but I do want some input from those of you that have bought one, regardless of which version you bought, and how have things held up for you. Now, by chance, if you're not familiar and you're looking at either the Air Unit Lite or what's oftentimes I refer to as the DJI version versus the HD0 version, and which one you should get, well, it's going to come down to a little bit of cost. The HD0 version is $35 less. You still have to make additional investment into either a VRX that goes on your goggles, or you have to buy goggles specifically for HD0 in the Fat Shark Scout HDs. The DJI version has a similar sort of requirement in that you have to buy the DJI goggles, the black goggles that kind of look like Ant-Man or something like that with the little antennas that poke out. So those are going to be cost differences, but then the secondary point is there's going to be an image quality difference, which you do need to do your homework, do your research out on the internet, and figure out whether it's something that you would rather go for image quality over the advantage HD0 had, which is consistent low latency. Latency is the time from the lens to your goggles, and kind of feeling connected to the quad. So it's pretty much doing what you're expecting to do. Now we're talking milliseconds here, so there's not like a huge delay between either one of them. So some people have a big issue with the delay versus not having the delay, and other people just adapt to it. So that's something else. I can't necessarily advise you. If you get the opportunity to go to a flying field and be able to be in the goggles for both, I think it'd be worth that time at least before you make a big investment into either system, really. Hopefully keep this one short because we've kind of gone over this. Of course, there are more details in my full original video, and I will have that link down in the video description, as well as the 3 different versions of this that are available and the resellers that have them. So it's kind of be a lengthy list. Pretty much I just use Google. I type in Crux 35, Crux 35 HD 0, and then I find all the vendors that I can find. Not all of them that I can find. I figure 5, it should be a good round number as a max. So you'll find 5 different vendors for each one of these versions. Some vendors have a different product page for each version. Some vendors just have the option to select a different version. So you may find various number of links from the different resellers of this down in the video description below. But if you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in the comments section below, especially you owners that already have one. How's it held up? I appreciate your time. Thanks for watching. Hello everyone, today we're taking a look at the Happy Model Crux 3, powered by 1202.5 6400 kV motors. On those motors are GemFan 3018 by Blade props without motor screws. The all-in-one board is the ESC, flight controller, the VTX, and the receiver. And this version is 2.2, which has the VTX, which is power switchable up to 200 milliwatts. The camera is the Caddx Ant. The main connector has been removed, but we do still have the connector that we can change the settings on the camera. Battery connector is an XT30. Battery is held on place with a rubber band and a foam pad. It does come with the Caddx control board, so you can change settings on the camera. You get an extra foam pad, extra rubber bands for battery mounting, extra props, screwdriver, and various screws down in there. It also comes with this mount for the Insta360 Go. It's secured via zip ties. Carbon fiber looks to be 2.5 millimeters thick. The frame is not all that stiff. Most of the flex seems to be happening in this area though. It weighs 42.25 grams. I flew it primarily on this all-line 450 milliamp 2S battery, which brings the weight up to almost 71 grams. With the Insta360 Go and the mount and the zip ties that are used to mount the mount, it weighs just about 91 grams. And if you really wanted to, you can fly it on a 1S battery, and with a 520 milliamp 1S battery, it comes in at 56.5 grams. So this is an evening time flight, so the wind is a bit calmer. We still have a bit of a breeze, it's just not high winds. And this is, you can see on the OSD, is 2S. I flew it on 1S, I'll show you a sample of that. I just don't think it's viable. I look kind of hard at a reason why you would fly 1S, and the only reason I can come up with is that you're just starting out. You want to keep your cost as low as possible and your weight as low as possible. And you're just looking at doing flat flying. In other words, you're not going to be doing any punch outs. You're not trying to do any sort of flips and rolls, although it can do some very muted sort of flying. It's really just cruising at 1S, and it's really not designed for 1S. It's a byproduct that Crazy VX, the 2.2 version, can do 1S that we kind of think it should be able to do 1S, but at 6400 kV, it's just not made for 1S. We would need something around 10,000, 11,000, 12,000 kV to really be viable on a 3-inch prop and doing a 1S flight that is really much fun. So this is probably as close as many of our international friends are going to get to having a baby tooth. You know, it's still 2S. Maybe there'll be a ready to fly that is released that is truly 1S. We'll see. Newbie Drone just released their product here in the US. I know that shipping can be cost prohibitive for our friends that are flying outside of the US, but I think this is what you're looking for as far as flight feel and flight goes. If you're wanting to stay light and you're wanting to stay kind of discreet. I had a pretty bad crash with the Insta360 Go, so I had the extra weight. I clipped one of the arms on the tree along the back line of the fence, and I'll show you that from an Insta360 Go perspective. It was kind of a funny moment. The Insta360 Go did eject, and then I had to kind of scrounge around to find it. Thankfully, as you saw on the quick roll, I did find it. Quite efficient setup the Crux 3 is. We're going to get a flight time of over 4 minutes in my particular flight style. Depending upon how you fly, you may find that you get way more than that. You may get way less if you're just a complete burner, I guess, as well. So fall is starting to set in. I'm interested in knowing how many of you live in areas where you'll be flying outdoor through, let's say, November, December, January, February. I know here it tends to get pretty cold. We have had some pretty mild winters in the last couple of years. I'm kind of wondering, I haven't looked into it, I'm kind of wondering if this winter might be a little bit more aggressive. Typically we get a fair bit of snow and we get a fair bit of ice as well as just really cold temperatures. But you can see this is capable. It can do the punch outs over the house both ways. It races around pretty good. I think some people will prefer this over, say, my 1S, my Zero Grav, the Ion, I believe it is, because I use the Runcam Nano 3. I really find that that's kind of one of those sections with the Runcam Nano 3 that you either like the camera or you really dislike the camera. There doesn't seem to be any middle ground there. I like the camera. Of course, that's with the original V1 lens, which you can't get anymore. Even the V2 lens, I don't think is terrible. I think it's way better than what we came from a couple years ago when we had these all-in-one VTX cameras. But it's still, you know, people have their own preference. There's nothing wrong with that. You just have to sacrifice a little bit of weight, and in micros, weight can mean a little or it can mean a lot. Depends on you who you are. As far as the rubber band mounting of the battery, I don't have a huge problem with that. It would be nice if we could actually use a strap. I'm not a fan of 3D printed holsters either. In my experience with those, if you have a fairly hard crash, the holsters for 3D printed and batteries, that will oftentimes break as well. Or at the very least, it'll come out and then you'll have to put it back in if you can find it. I didn't have any problems with the battery ejecting on my crashes. Again, I did lose, or the Insta360 Go did eject. And we've landed. We've come in at 4 minutes and 12 seconds. And our battery is a little bit above my normal ending voltage at 3.57 volts per cell. This is my 1S flight, and I clip a prop on the chair back and go down right away. So we're going to try to take back off. We'll do a little punch out. Pretty muted punch out, really. But like I said, this is viable if you're trying to do relatively flat flying. You're not trying to do much. And the reason why I say flat is that recovery is actually kind of hard. So if you go and see, if you saw that dive just now, I'm sure you saw it if you're looking at the screen, but recovering from the dive means you have to nose up as well as throttle up. And as you get deeper into the 1S battery, you have to nose up and throttle up even harder. So doing smooth flight on 1S and doing any sort of acrobatics, even the mild acrobatics that I do, is challenging to keep from crashing because of that recovery voltage. And you know, we're not really punching out at this phase where voltage on our battery is already low enough to where we're kind of just flying over the top of the house. And that's why I wanted to show you the 1S. If you're training, or if you're getting started, I should say, it can be viable because you're just trying to cruise around, you're trying to get accustomed to flying an acro possibly, maybe you came from Horizon or Angle Mode, or maybe you've been flying indoor with Whoops, that's how you got started, and now you're going to venture outside. 1S can be viable. I'm not sure how viable that is, because there's only one shop that I'm aware of where you can buy a 1S battery with an XT30 on it already. Of course, you can transition your 1S batteries to an XT30 if you're comfortable with that. It's something to be careful of. When you're snipping those battery wires, you got to be careful. You don't want to get your snips across both leads, and you'll end up with a short, some sparks, and some excitement there. But it's something that you can do. You also want to be careful about heating up your battery wires too much. That can be dangerous as well. So, and that's one of the reasons why I kind of hedge whether it's viable on 1S. But on 2S, it's loads of fun, and it should provide you many fun flights. Initially, I was concerned about the frame and its durability because we do have some pretty thin parts there on the outside edge. But again, I added the Insta360 Go, and I had at least one crash where the Insta360 Go ejected. It also snapped off the mount for the Insta.
其实我看到流血的时候，整个觉得超恐怖的。
因为他知道他等下的下场是什么。
你知道这才恐怖的部分。这个人是不会当做演出有意外，是那种你他妈在干嘛？
才没有啊！
但我真的知道是谁，我会很开心，但我还不知道他。
你知道你讲这句话其实恐怖的吗？
我有一个很重要的，就是我曾经很喜欢，但我搞丢了自己。
外面聊天好大声哦。
哦，最近我邻居也是这个样子。
我邻居最近也这样
聊天聊很大声，什么意思？
就是我睡觉睡到一半的时候，窗外面有超大声音在聊，聊超久，然后20分钟那种。
你那时候睡着了吗？
我被聊醒，
被撩醒。
没有，说不定是你的梦话，你知道吗？
哇！
我已经眼睛张开了，我没有再醒一次。
哦，
如梦之梦嘛。
没有，因为有些人梦话讲出来的时候，会以为是别人在讲，但其实
的确是有，的确是有。
我以前小时候有被自己的鼾声吓醒过。
鼾声哦。
对，就是这样，然后就。
我有时候在梦里大叫，然后醒来想说，我有大叫吗？
你就看你的猫反应是怎么样，就知道了。
因为我试了一下，就是我会试一下，就是比如我在梦里是 然后醒来就会啊不对，跟我刚听到声音不一样
不同，
对对对，我听起来的音场是不太一样。
但你有遇过，就是你会听到好像很大的电铃声，
有，
然后其实没有，其实没有人按掉，
有，的确是有这样，
对吧？
没错，
这就是门铃，完全没有，其实没有任何人要来。
我是会听到
我听到敲门，
救护车声，跟消防车声，
真的。
然后我会必须要跟旁边人确认说你有听到吗？
有烟吗？有烟吗？
你说你一直在醒着的时候吗？那就偏恐怖了。
睡前有时候常常会进入这个状态。
那你会偶尔在山里面听到部队在行军的声音？
我会听到针掉到地上的声音啊。
在深山里面吗？自带音效片哦，
听到很多地震波的声音。
就你看鬼故事就是这样子啊，什么晚上走在路上，然后听到什么部队行进的声音。
以前的冤灵嘛。
对，就是到一些什么战场的时候会听到这个东西。说不定你是听到
哇，好想跟他交流一下。
一个部队吗？
就是把他的故事都叙述起来，叙述的故事都写下来，然后出书。
你要先跟人家连长沟通啊。
但我真的蛮想要去检查我自己那个什么睡眠吧。
睡眠检测。
睡眠检测是真的要在那边睡一晚上。
是的。
真的。
因为要佩戴仪器。
那他那边可以是舒服可以睡的吗？还是
我一直很好奇这样，
听说他有床垫，
听说他那边床是什么席梦思那种，
真的，
就是厉害的床，
一定要让你睡得好才是准的。
对，但是你身上会挂着一堆仪器，然后会有旁边会有什么？
那怎么睡得着？
对，我也很好奇这件事情啊。
那怎么睡得着？挂一堆仪器怎么睡得着？
护士会躺在你旁边啊。
那就更睡不着了吧？
拘束我，把手脚都绑起来，要把我翻来翻去。
因为他也不能够，比如说用一些安定药物，不行嘛。
护士躺在旁边，这护士也太可怜了吧？太
看怎么走向。
很壮的男护士躺在你旁边，
那就是
压住你的喉管，
那就是拘束我。
对，
让你微微缺氧之后，你就会有睡意。但我一直很好奇的，因为欧也有去做过，好像。
真的。
对，然后我也是蛮好奇怎么睡得着。因为毕竟我本来就是睡不好，我才去做睡眠检测。
就欧爷的睡眠会一直笑，他自己笑，
会一直讲话吧？
一直笑，我觉得他自己笑，
一直学天线宝宝。大家好，早安。
为什么嘴巴要歪边的？
今天要干嘛？
今天录 podcast 啊。大家在哪？
我是康康，
我是哈利，
欢迎大家收看。
加的康。
有蚊子是不是啊？
好莫名其妙的一个隐晦版本的开头曲。
我跟你讲，有些人说听这个节目会睡着，刚刚已经睡着了。
已经睡着了，还没有听到内容就睡着了。
到睡眠检测，听自己的节目。
天哪，我觉得自己节目不可能。
我会反胃，
因为听到自己的声音会不习惯。
我会超不舒服。好了，今天又要来 QQA 了，大家还是给我们很多问题哦。来，第一题什么呢？
好，是谁？
又走位了 QQ
走位，
招比亚略过，随心情而定他的性别，31到40岁。想请问达康哈，如果喜欢的店走位了，愿意再去消费几次呢？我自己是2到5次，越好吃愿意再多试几次，还是一样走位就会放弃呢？
随心情而定的性别。
又在讨论这个吗？
没有，他们这是他们的创意啊。
对啊。
随心情而变，这个很猛哎。
我现在心情是男的。
对啊。
我现在心情是
女的。
乳牛。
乳牛没有，那不是性别，那我问你是公的乳牛还是母的乳牛？这个样子。
乳牛
上半身是公，下半身是母。
乳牛没有公的。
乳牛哦。
乳牛有公的。
有吧？要不然乳牛是跟
乳牛有公的吗？
乳牛有公的吗？
它一定有一种。
乳牛有公的啊。
有吧？也叫乳牛。
有公的啊？为什么？为什么？
这是个很奇怪。
乳牛有公的。
乳牛有公的吧？
可乳牛是一个。
它就是一种品种。
对啊，不能当成乳。
我以为产乳的牛才叫乳牛。
那产乳的娘呢？
奶娘啊。乳娘啊。对啊，乳娘会有男的吗？不会有啊，因为产不出来啊。
如果说台南牛肉汤的主要肉品来源之一就是公的乳。
对不起了，我以为它就是产乳的才叫乳牛。
对，
它这个品种。
你刚刚那样怀疑的时候，我也想说，对耶，好像突破了什么，但没想到，
原来是品种这样。好，谢谢网络时代让我不要继续无知下去。
你看，它名称可以让我们反思很多事情。
好，但是我现在问题是，刚刚他问的是什么？
刚刚他问的，
你看
你喜欢的那家店如果走位了，你
啊
还会愿意尝试几次呢？它通常是2到5次。
你不要每次听到前面资讯之后，你就后面就不管了，好吧？
没有办法啊，我在想东西啊。
我看他的那个脑袋的那 CPU 排程真的很怪。
你换个多核心的好不好
对？啊，
10核心、12核心的现在。
你刚刚那首歌怎么唱的像蚊子一样哦？
太久之前的话题了吧？
你风包还没传到、哦，那个网络风包还没来。
这排程就厉害。
很厉害。你是 IE 耶，这个浏览器。
不是吧？他排程也不是这样吧？
啊，我今天起床忘记刷牙。
好啦，哦，他说的这个问题其实应该是一个很有趣的心理问题，就是爱店嘛，对吧？
爱店，常去吃的店，它的味道变了。
哇，
我先说，先不管给他几次机会，我心理上会有一种很复杂情感，就是有一种被自己的很熟识的人背叛的感觉。
哦，哇，你把它对位到这边就难过了。
但是又有一点就是，你这么做，一定有你自己的原因吧？我很想跟你聊聊那个原因是什么。你原本这么棒，但你为什么变这样？
就会讲出来啊。
你就对他讲出来。
没有是哪一家，或是什么样的料理？什么样的料理？
就我们巷口的牛肉面啊。
牛肉面变了吗？
哦，它有变哦。
乳牛吗？
乳牛变，它现在变斗牛了。就是那家牛肉面。
哦，
你原本
是说我也吃过的。
我们死之前常去吃的那一家。
我们死之前。
我们死之前常去吃的那一家。
什么东西啊？
我们后来就没办法，有人拜我们才吃到，什么鬼是不是？
讲话讲清楚一点。
我说我们之前不是常去吃吗？一起去吃啊。
我知道了，知道了。
对啊，那家牛肉面啊。
那我们当然你要说一下它变怎么变了，什么意思？
就它的汤头完全变了。
哦，汤头变了。
然后我记得卤肉饭也变了吧？
不要讲越来越多资讯，这样有点危险。
但厨师呢？厨师还是一样，
厨师我不认识，不好意思，我不像他那种变态会去挑战那个大卫鸡肉面阿姨是谁，好不好？
因为有一些店，它其实是它整个转卖给别人
啊，这种然后把
这的确是，
对，
这的确是。之前有一家鸭血堡也是，我怀疑是因为这原因。
哎，哪一家？我也有一家鸭血堡。
我又来了，为什么？
哎，
我说的是连锁的那一家。
我不是。
哦，我说的是连锁。
我的不是连锁的。
对，我那家是连锁的。
了解，所以牛肉面，对啊，牛肉面这变汤头变了，你会不喜欢？如果是面、汤头、肉，哪一个变了你最不喜欢？
我想一下啊，面、汤头、肉嘛。
对。就比如说它的牛肉面本来
好，我比较奇怪面。
嘿。
我第一个是面。
哦，第一个是面。
对。
所以换乌龙面不行。
我直接现场暴怒说你店名给我换一个。
战旗的不行。
不是，这就不是原来的东西啊。
啊，我觉得是
喜欢战旗的吗？
战旗的。
战旗乌龙面。
哦，蛮好吃的。
战旗的乌龙面不会煮还是很难吃的，先跟大家说一下这件事情。
你喜欢第一个在乎面，好妙。
我在乎的是汤哎。
我其实面跟汤差不多，但是你说面跟汤谁前面，我是面前面。
哎，你们都不会在乎那个吗？
哪个？
碗上面的花纹。
哦，不是。
不会吗？
你有给我这选项吗？你刚刚给我这选项吗？你为什么突然多了一个？
湿气吗？结果你在一个
就是它的花纹露出汤的那个水平面的那个花纹变了，你懂吗？
葱花的大小呢？
哦，这个我很在乎。
哦，
葱花的大小，那种大到就是好像一整根。那种人是有病，你知道吗？
我有吃过。我觉得你切的时候，
花在哪里？
切的时候食物我可以理解。你再把它抓进碗里，你怎么没有发现这件事情？
夸张哎，那种都超怪的。
而且你知道，有的是那种只切几刀那种，它整个是
连在一起的，
变成一个花的那种感觉。那真的是葱花一朵，
对，那
在上面。
所以你给他什么？你会给几次机会？你那一间店牛肉面店？
我算一下，我实际上给他几次机会。我通常是这样子的，我吃完那一刻，我会抱着困惑及有一些情绪。那个情绪我要消化一阵子。就可能要真的要消化到1个月左右。
你会站在厨房门口一直哭喊为什么吗？
我会经过的时候就，为什么你变这样呢 ？OK， 那我自己消化一下，然后就走经过那家店。
最好有人知道原因是什么。
店员就在那洗。
你的